50 years ago, a blockbuster film hit the theaters to huge crowds and rave reviews. It would go on to become a classic, but in doing so, it would stoke a fear so great that even today, people continue to be terrified of the film's star animal predator, avoiding its very habitat and calling for the destruction of its species. Of course, I am talking about this.
Look!
Okay, no, sorry. I couldn't help it. 1975 was a real banger of a year for movies. I'm actually talking about Jaws. Jaws, the horror film directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, and of course, Bruce, the pneumatically powered prop shark, who was built after the producers realized they could not, in fact, train a real great white shark. I love Jaws, having seen it at far too young an age on VHS, because I swear to God, parents really did not give a shit in the 80s, especially when it came to their third child. It was one major reason why I preferred the pool over the shore. The other reason, of course, being sand. And I wasn't the only one. Jaws freaked people out so much that in an article published in a 2015 issue of the Australian Journal of Political Science, Dr. Chris Pepin-Neff coined the term the Jaws effect to describe how the film has influenced policy decisions related to sharks over the decades, particularly that sharks are intentionally hunting people, that shark bites are fatal events, and that killing individual sharks will solve the problem. Pepin-Neff explores several case studies, including incidents during the spring and summer of the year 2000, in which 3 people were killed in one area after being bitten by sharks. This led to people to demand the beaches be closed until the responsible shark had been hunted down and killed, with the public, the media, and authorities all constantly referring to Jaws, with the politicians particularly desperate to not look anything like the do-nothing mayor of Jaws, even if it meant doing something that shark researchers said was not the correct thing to do. By that point, Peter Benchley, the original author of the book Jaws, had seen the Jaws effect in action so often that he was disgusted with the legacy of his book leading to the slaughter of sharks all over the planet. He actually wrote to the Australian people saying, "While I cannot pretend to comprehend the grief felt by the most recent victims, friends, and family, and would not conceive of diminishing the horror of the attack, I plead with the people of Australia who live with, understand, and in general respect sharks more than any other nation on Earth to refrain from slaughtering this magnificent ocean predator in the hope of achieving some catharsis, some fleeting satisfaction from wreaking vengeance on one of nature's most exquisite creations. This was not a rogue shark, tantalized by the taste of human flesh and bound now to kill and kill again. Such creatures do not exist, despite what you might have derived from Jaws." Unfortunately, his words fell on deaf ears, and a policy was put in place to kill any shark that harmed any human, but he did continue to advocate for sharks and for oceanic diversity until his death a few years later. Thanks to efforts like his and other advocates and organizations, in the past few decades, sharks have seen a little bit of a bump in an improvement of their reputation. Yes, they're still scary, but I, for instance, now have a better understanding of the relative risk of going into the ocean. I learned that most interactions between sharks and humans are accidental, and that most sharks do not view humans as a light snack. And I'm now to the point where I spend hours at a time surfing, swimming, snorkeling, and scuba diving in the shark-infested waters here in Northern California, which I much prefer to the human-infested beaches and pools. An interesting part of that improving reputation has been the influence of influencers. Shark influencers. Those of you who, unlike me, don't spend a significant amount of time in the ocean or planning to get in the ocean or just thinking about the ocean might not realize that this is a recent trend. There are a number of people who have attracted a significant following by posting photos and videos of themselves diving alongside sharks, which in theory sounds perfectly reasonable, right? You know, again, most species of sharks do not see humans as a viable prey source. And so a powerful and exciting demonstration of that principle is showing sharks not attacking a very vulnerable human in their midst. In practice, things are a little more complicated. Ocean Ramsey is probably the most famous of this type of influencer, having more than 2 million Instagram followers and even her own shark diving operation in Hawaii. Ramsey has been criticized by shark researchers and other experts for not just swimming and posing near sharks, but for harassing them, for lack of a better word. She touches them, pushes them, and even grabs their fins to ride them. As shark researcher David Schiffman told the Washington Post in 2019, "I can't believe that please don't grab the 18-foot-long wild predator is something that needs to be explicitly said out loud, but here we are." Because yeah, sharks aren't maniacal human hunting machines, but they are apex predators. And while the vast majority of sharks pose no threat to humans, some of them definitely do, like the great white sharks that Ramsey has been seen molesting. The white shark in question was in Hawaii to feed on a decomposing whale, meaning that on the one hand, it was probably stuffed with food and unlikely to want to munch down on the toothpick pestering it. But on the other hand, anyone who knows anything about feeding frenzies around whale carcasses knows that it's quite easy for an apex predator to get a little carried away and not really pay attention to what it's chomping down on. And unlike many other sharks, when a white shark chomps, it really means it. It chomps hard. Of course, though, it's not just that there's a danger to humans in this circumstance. You're unlikely to do much damage to a great white shark by petting it, though in Ramsey's case, apparently that shark may have been pregnant, which does make it a little more vulnerable. But again, most sharks are smaller and, more prone to be stressed out or hurt by human interaction. For instance, take this piece of shit, apparently named Grant Murdoch, who thought it would be a good idea to bear hug a lemon shark, which is a vulnerable species in Bora Bora, and ride it around. Lemon sharks have never killed a human, though in this case, it probably should have. If this one got scared and bit this moron, then guess what would happen? That's right, another scary shark attack in the news, leading to more people thinking these are evil man-eaters who need to be culled. For instance, back in February, a Russian influencer, Nastia Vitanova, was bitten by a shark while diving and taking photos in the Maldives, where the guides apparently urged swimmers to get closer and closer to the sharks to take more impressive photos. Though her hand only needed stitches and she was healing, the headline said she was traumatized while covered in blood from the attack. I was interested to see if there was any data on how influencers like Ramsey have impacted sharks in the past few years. And I was surprised to actually find a story from April that I originally completely missed. Selfie seekers fueling rise in shark attacks. A growing number of shark bites are down to social media influencers encouraging tourists to stroke the predators, according to researchers. Wow. I looked around and I saw actually there were a lot of headlines around that time reporting on this new study. Influencers are to blame for rise in shark attacks, scientists say. Selfie-seeking tourists could be contributing to rise in shark attacks. How influencers are the reason for rise in shark attacks. Experts shocked that they have to issue warning. Weirdly, not a single one of those articles, not the New York Post, MSN, the Daily Mail, linked to the study in question or even gave the title of it. They all linked back to that original article in the Times, which also did not link to the study or give its title or any kind of reference. If you've watched any of my videos up to this point, you know this is what we call a big red flag. Luckily, the Times did name the lead author. Professor Eric Cloua of PSL University in France, who led the research, said that social media appeared to be playing a role. I don't encourage, as many influencers do on social networks, people to cling to a shark's dorsal fin or stroke it under the pretext of proving that they are harmless, and those people are supposedly working for their conservation. He suspects that humans take liberties with sharks, especially smaller ones, in a way they would not with an unfamiliar dog. People know the difference between a Yorkshire Terrier and a pit bull, whereas they don't know the difference between a blacktip reef shark and a bull shark, which are their marine equivalents, he said. There's an incredibly negative perception bias towards sharks. They are responsible for fewer than 10 human deaths a year worldwide, whereas dogs are responsible for more than 10,000 deaths and are perceived positively by the public. Those are all great points, and I have no doubt that Kluwe said those things to the Times reporter in answer to their questions. But I wanted to know exactly how quickly shark attacks have been rising and how the researchers were able to link this rise to selfie-seeking tourist influencers. So I looked at all of Kluwe's recent papers, which were many. This guy is prolific as fuck. Well done. And I found the one that best matched what the Times reported. It's this one. The Talion Law, Tooth for a Tooth. Self-defense as a motivation for shark bites on human aggressors. Weird that they don't mention influencers in the title, huh? Or in the description. But surely they must in the paper, right? Surely. Right? Yeah, no, I read the entire paper. It was good. And then I had to go back to the Times article to double check that I had the right one. I assumed I must have gotten it wrong, but this one was published the same time as the Times article. Check. Published in the journal Frontiers in Conservation. Check. Records of shark encounters in the waters off French Polynesia between 2009 and 2023. Check. Of the 74 bites recorded in this period, about 5% were found likely to have been defensive. Check. I think we can safely say that this is the paper being referred to by the Times, and yet nowhere in this paper do the words influencer or social media or selfie even appear, because that's not what this paper is about. This research is actually about exploring how common it is that a shark is performing self-defense as opposed to predation in human interactions, which they found happens often enough to push back on the narrative that all shark-human interactions are attacks. It's fundamentally unfair and incorrect to categorize a shark as attacking a human when the shark is simply trying to protect its own life. Aha, you may be thinking, even absent those keywords, surely this research showed numerous examples of sharks defensively biting people we might call influencers who harass them, right? No, in fact, they did not detail a single instance of that occurring. What they did find was that the vast majority of these shark bites occurred because of, drumroll please, fishing. Many people do not know this, but fishing is one of the absolute greatest dangers to shark populations worldwide. And I'm not even talking about people who are specifically fishing for sharks, although that can be a problem. Influencers like Ocean Ramsey ask people to support legislation like HB 553, which criminalizes the purposeful capturing and killing of sharks, with the slightly ironic carve-out for killing any shark that hurts a human. Now, killing sharks for meat can be a threat to sharks' population decline if it's not done sustainably, as David Schiffman describes in this 2020 lecture at Arizona State University. The biggest threat is unsustainable fishing practices of sharks and of other fish. Sustainable shark fisheries do exist, and Schiffman argues that most shark researchers agree that banning sustainable shark fisheries in the United States, which has the most sustainable shark fisheries in the world, does nothing to improve the populations and, in fact, does a lot to make the problem worse. But in this research, it's specifically the fishing for other species that leads to these defensive shark bites. Spearfishing, for instance, involves divers cruising past sharks with a whole bunch of delicious food. When the shark understandably tries to get a bite, they get a spear to the spine, which causes them to, again, understandably bite the thing that's stabbing them. In one case study, the researchers describe an incident in which two spear fishermen shot a gray reef shark in the side with an arrow to prevent it from getting their catch. The arrow's barb got stuck in the shark's side, and to prevent the loss of their weapon, they started pulling the shark back to their boat to try to get their arrow back, at which point the shark bit one of them in the calf. He slapped it until it let go and then bit him again on the hand, so he grabbed it and dragged it nearer to the boat. It then let go of his hand and turned and bit the other guy on the knee, at which point the first guy full on cut off the shark's tail, causing it to sink and presumably die. They flew to Tahiti for medical treatment, at which point the news all reported this as shark attack. Now look, I'm not saying that these guys are evil for spearfishing in a part of the world that relies in heavy part on spearfishing to survive. But I think we could all agree that the shark is also not the bad guy here. Another common cause of bites in this research were traditional fish traps, which are built by Polynesian fishermen using the natural formation of coral and reef atolls that allow fish inside but utilize a labyrinth system to prevent them from leaving. A few days pass before the fish are then collected, by which time sometimes a shark has gotten into the trap as well and found a delightful all-you-can-eat buffet. And then the fishermen need to enter the trap to incapacitate and usually kill the shark in order to gather the remaining fish, which often results in the shark fighting back, which again, I think we can agree, pretty understandable reaction on the shark's part. The final category of defensive bites described in this research finally comes closest to being something that you might see and be inspired by on social media. It's labeled shark handling, which does sound like the category that those shark riding influencers would fall under, though those are not any of the examples. Instead, the researchers point to scientists getting bitten while trying to collect samples from sharks, and later on in the discussion section, they describe an incident of people who were bitten while attempting to rescue sharks that had beached themselves. Again, they don't explicitly mention social media, but I'll go ahead and make the connection because I constantly get the algorithm showing me inspiring videos of average people on the beach coming together to rescue animals that have beached themselves like sharks. And I can absolutely see those videos inspiring other people to do the same thing. So with that in mind, I'll share what these researchers had to say about the rescues in question. These people made two mistakes. First, grabbing the animal by the tail, which has the double disadvantage of putting deleterious stress on the animal's spine with the risk of serious dislocation and of bite exposure, as sharks are naturally flexible, linked to their cartilaginous skeleton and can turn around to bite at almost 180 degrees. And secondly, expecting that the animal, most of the time in great distress, will consider the would-be rescuers as supportive assets. As a matter of fact, the most instinctive reflex for sharks will be to defend themselves and bite. The absolute best thing you can do if you see a shark in distress or any animal in distress is to pick up your cell phone and call your local wildlife management department to alert the actual experts to come help and find out what you should do next. If you come across a human being lying in the street covered in blood, you wouldn't just grab their feet and drag them back into their house, right? You would call the experts, find out what you should do to stabilize the situation until they can get there. You should do the same for wild animals. So yeah, I agree with the researchers who urge people to stop manhandling wildlife. Whenever you are in nature and wherever you are in nature, the best thing you can do is to leave no trace and don't annoy the fauna trying to live out your Disney princess fantasy. If you're an influencer, you absolutely can encourage people to see wild animals as complex and fascinating and essential members of our ecosystem without touching them. That is possible. Like, I get that that's part of these people's brand, and that's part of what made them popular. But just to take an example, will you please just look at Ocean Ramsey? Like, just look at her. She would be popular on Instagram if she was doing knitting tutorials or selling Cutco knives. There is no reason that she and other popular influencers can't influence people to respect wildlife and leave them the fuck alone. But that said, I've seen no evidence to suggest that their terrible behavior is leading to a rise in shark attacks. And it's actually pretty hilarious that all of these awful mainstream media outlets are literally using shark attacks in their headlines to talk about a study that concludes the existence of self-defense bites calls into question the practice of labeling all shark bites as attacks. The media plays a key role in this perception, tending in the event of bites to portray sharks as the aggressor, even when humans are responsible for initiating the interaction. This simplistic approach damages the image of sharks and indeed their conservation, which relies on public support. If you are inspired and you want to help the sharks, then the best thing you can do, besides following the experts like David Schiffman, who is at Why Sharks Matter on Blue Sky, is to check your own diet. Here in NorCal, we have the absolutely awesome Monterey Bay Aquarium, which launched Seafood Watch in 1999 to provide both businesses and consumers a simple science-based recommendation system to guide them towards sustainable options. They provide guides organized by region or species that are updated regularly to tell you what you should avoid when choosing your meal, and they also partner with chefs and businesses to certify that they are a safe place for seafood. And for those outside the U.S., the Marine Stewardship Council offers similar guidance and certification around the globe. And for the love of all things good, please, whatever you do, do not ride an apex predator for internet clout. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.